Organisations Thrive. Today, I have the great pleasure of Sally Orange on the show. Good morning to you, Sally.
Good morning, and thank you very much for inviting me to come and chat with you.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure, and I'm just going to tell the audience a little bit about you so they can understand who you are, but we'll obviously talk a bit more about who you are as we have a conversation. So you're an endurance runner, adventurer, and mental health campaigner. You're the only person on the planet to complete a marathon on every continent in fancy dress as different pieces of fruit. Might be a clue that you've got a name called Orange. Part of that, which gives you a flavour of who you are and what you're about. You do hold multiple Guinness World Records and world firsts. You've run over 50 marathons, completed 8 full Ironman triathlons, and have completed 22 years exemplary service in the Royal Army Medical Corps as a physiotherapy officer. And that included obviously an operational tour of duty in Afghanistan. So quite an accolade and of experience there, and incredible. And just some of the other events I'm aware of in terms of your cycling events you've done. I mean, you've done the Land's End, John O'Groats, and the other way around as well. You've done the North Coast 500. You've raced across America, just to name a few more there. So you've done quite a lot. And so I guess it's amazing, really. It is incredible, and a huge amount of endurance there, and you're an adventure. I want to go back to really, as in, what is the why behind all that? Because there's some sort of driving force to do such amount of events, but also endurance to keep you going. So I just want to get an understanding of the why, Sally.
Yeah, I suppose when you list it all like that, first of all, it makes it sound old, doesn't it? The 22 years service. But I look back and I distinctly remember the very first London Marathon. I was 8 years old and just remember thinking, wow, that looks incredible. I want to do that someday. It took another 24 years until I actually plucked up the courage to actually go and do it. So it's certainly never been something that I've always, an endurance background is not what I've come from. And yeah, I think, it was having that in my mind that it just seems so far out of my reach for someone like me to be able to raise the money or, do that distance. It was just something that was so beyond anything that I thought I could possibly do. And I've had quite a few difficulties with my own mental health, which in the more recent years has sort of, I've realized that can actually help me by setting a goal and just breaking that goal down and sort of moving forward very slowly with each part of it, not looking at the great big picture, but just the smaller chunks, the bite-sized chunks to get there. And yeah, it's just kind of become part of me, I guess. So I realised that the drive is something that I feel. I remember crossing the finish line of that very first marathon that I ran, and just feeling like a complete superhero. I did it dressed as a superhero, but feeling like one for the first time ever. And for so many times in my life, I'd felt a complete failure. It was that feeling that then I was like, this is a really nice feeling. Promptly followed by never again, because a marathon is hard. I've actually gone on to do 71, I think it is now, marathons. But for me, the why is changing the conversation a little bit, or changing the how and why I do it. Is I'm never going to be the fastest or the fittest person to run a marathon, but for me, it's about going out, enjoying yourself, and raising money for charity. And also now it's become about raising awareness and opening a conversation about mental ill health. So long-winded answer to your question.
No. It's interesting to understand that 8 years old, you had this sort of inspiration of something far out there, and you felt you weren't, and you said it, you weren't sort of good enough. You couldn't do that. So what got you to a place where you ended up doing your first ever marathon? Because, it's sort of a common thing, but it's still a big thing, a marathon. I mean, I've done quite a few marathons myself, but it's still a big thing. And so what got you to that place where I'm going to do a marathon? And was it, you talked about your mental health. What was it thinking a marathon would help solve that or help you with that?
At that point, it wasn't that at all. And if I am completely honest, I think it's like many people when they take on some of these ideas as they are at the time, and it involves alcohol. That I can, I can do this. I'm going to do this, and then the realization the next day that you've said, yeah, I'm going to do this. And I think for some people they do that, but it's actually sticking to that what you've actually said you're going to do. And I am someone that if I say I'm going to do something, I will find a way to do it. I believe that if you really want to do something, then you will find a way. And often people will say to me about a marathon, I could never run a marathon. And I use the scenario that if you had a mother, father, daughter, a child, somebody very close to you that was 26.2 miles away and they were in trouble, and there is no train, there's no there's no transport, there's no other way to get there than by on foot. I believe that anyone can achieve a marathon, not all at the same speed, but we're not all trying to do it at the same speed. We're all doing it for different reasons, and that's one of the things I love about marathons now is finding out other people's stories about why they do something, because everybody's got a story, everybody's got a reason, and it takes that pressure off having to do it for a certain time. The amount of people who will say to me, "What time are you going for?" and I say, "The time of my life." Because that way it takes that pressure off. I am very good at putting pressure on myself, but I can take that pressure off by going, actually, I'm just going to enjoy this. By wearing the fruit costumes, it makes people smile, and that's a really nice feeling to be able to see other people smiling, even if it is just for a small amount, small amount of time. But young people, if that can be the inspiration for them to go, that looks really good fun, I want to do something. It all starts off small. I didn't, to get to that marathon completion, I'd sort of done a 5K and a 10K and a half. So it's the other parts of it that you can get from it that I think, for me, it opens up different conversations and different opportunities. And also, if I can help somebody else on their marathon, I know what it's like to do your very first marathon. And everybody starts at that same place. If you've never done one before, you're all coming from that same place. And I remember the anxiety beforehand, the whole feelings. It's still so raw, and that somebody else is going to experience that on that day. So let them make it memorable in a positive way, rather than them looking back thinking, never again, I don't want to ever do that again. Let them be proud and celebrate what they've achieved.
I really like the analogy of almost saying, if somebody was in need and they're 26 miles away, you would run it and manage it and somehow on foot to get there. I like that. That's almost a challenge to people, actually, that anybody probably can do a marathon if they put their mind to it. And it is it's a step at a time, isn't it? Because I think people get caught up in the bigness of it all, but actually, and I've done quite a few marathons myself, and it's almost like each step, each K, or whatever it is, you just tick it off, and slowly you get there. And to me, that almost talks about purpose, isn't it? Having a sense of purpose. If there's somebody you need to get to the end to see somebody, that's like a purpose, a reason.
Yeah.
Have you discovered your purpose through all this? But also, is your purpose, does it help you with your sort of mental health and challenges you may have had, or have you, in terms of reflection of what you've done?
Yeah, absolutely. Looking back, it didn't start in that way, but it almost became a tool that I realized could use to create that sense of purpose. So, as I said, I struggle with my own mental health, and I didn't talk about it for years and years, 24 years. I never never mentioned the difficulties that I was having. But what I find now is by dressing as the fruit, as well as other people making them smile, it stands out. And I can be at a marathon and people will smile and come and say, why are you dressed as a piece of fruit? And first of all, I say my name is Sally Orange, which people then think that I've made my name, changed my name because of what I do. But that's the name that I was born with. And yeah, then I explain that I'm raising awareness of mental ill health and trying to break down that stigma and start a conversation. And quite often they will say that maybe they've had a problem or they know someone who's had a problem, and that in itself starts that conversation in a really subtle way, that people don't come up to me thinking that they're going to end up having that conversation. There's nothing on me saying this is about mental health, which I think to some people would be a barrier. To some people it would be an open door, and to others they might go, I don't want to have to go and talk about that. But by me being open and saying about my difficulties that I've had, then it helps other people. And it does help with just getting up daily and thinking, right, I'm choosing to go outside, and it might only be a walk sometimes, but I look back to when I was really, really unwell, and sometimes all I would achieve in a day was a shower, and that might not be a shower when I wash my hair. That was too much, and it sounds so silly to say that I can go and do a marathon, but I couldn't get in the shower. But I think it's just that daily doing something small that adds up over time, and the consistency of doing something positive each day over amount of time adds up to a great sum. Which actually I'm doing a challenge. I've set myself a challenge in September, and it's really using the whole narrative really of mental ill health. And I'm for the Queen's Jubilee, I did 7k a day for 70 days. Again, just 7k isn't a huge amount of distance. It wasn't always running. Sometimes it was walking or on a bike. But as I say, it was that consistency. So what I'm going to do in September is 7 times 7k a day for 7 days. But it's going to be 49k a day for 7 days. So 7 ultras in 7 days. But I'm doing.
Is that going to be running, or is that running?
It's going to be running, and it's going to be on a running track. So I'm calling the challenge Going Round the Bend, because when you have a mental illness, you feel like you're going round in circles. But the message being that if you break it down into small chunks, so only looking at 7k each time, I'm not looking at the bigger picture. I'm just looking at the thing in front of me of that 7k, and showing that things can be achievable. And also on the final day of that, I'm organising it so that teams can come together, and as a team they will cover the distance of 7k each. So as a team they will achieve an ultra marathon, which hopefully is a spark for some people to go, oh, that was really good fun, maybe I could do that in the future. So I kind of quite like to put a bit of a different spin on some of the challenges that I do, but more recently always with a mental health focus. And one of those marathons that I did was actually in the London Eye, and it was during the pandemic, and I did it to symbolise the highs and lows, or the ups and downs that the pandemic had on the nation's mental health. So I was in a pod or in a bubble, effectively. So I was isolated. I could only see people through a screen, but the wheel was going round at the time, and that showed that we were all in it together. We were all in the in the pandemic together. And then 6 days later, on World Mental Health Day, I did the world's deepest underground marathon, and called that Beneath the Surface, because you never know what's going on beneath the surface in somebody else's mind, and got the Guinness World Record for the world's deepest underground marathon. So yeah, so I put a little bit of a different spin. I think because of that purpose, And also, I'm incredibly fortunate to be one of the national ambassadors for the Army Cadet Force. So whilst there was a team of 6 of us underground doing that marathon, we organised for the Army Cadets to do an online mental health awareness training programme. So they would learn a 30-minute awareness programme. So they'd learn how to recognise, perhaps somebody isn't doing so well by either themselves or in a friend. So not just opening that conversation, and they actually got their own Guinness World Record for the most online users to do a mental health awareness training program in 24 hours. So the getting those messages into the Guinness Book of Records, and the brilliant thing about that record is that the more people that beat it, or that set a greater number to do it, the more people that learn about mental ill health. So it's a force for good, really, in many different ways.
You clearly have a huge purpose on this whole mental health and creating awareness and helping individuals, whether that's on a one-to-one, inspiring people when you're standing there at a start line dressed as an orange, and inspiring people with your why behind that, through to running the deepest marathon in the world, or doing the marathon in London Eye. And I love your creativity of that, and how you put a spin on the events, and it shows you've got some real, obviously, your own experience of it and insights. Do you want to share a bit more about where you've got that sort of insight and why you've got that creativity about it? Because it's quite unusual, really. It's not just, I'm just going to do seven ultras a day, which you are doing that. I say that's a huge thing. But you've then coined this going around the bend, going around a track, and running around a track on an ultra is even harder, because mentally that's really tough. And we'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. And you've coined this going around the bend, and I think that's really, I just love to understand where you get these ideas from, and where does it come from you personally to create those ideas?
I suffer with severe depression and chronic anxiety, and I've been in a place where I have wanted to take my life on number of occasions, and really struggled to reach out and get help or accept that there was a problem. I would put on became great at putting on a smile and saying that everything was okay. And I'm a high functioning depressive. I know that I can achieve, but the same as if I had asthma or diabetes, there would be times that it would be managing, and with asthma you may have an asthma attack and end up in hospital, or with diabetes things might not be going so well. So I think that personal experience of just feeling like I could never ever get out of it, and 20 hours of every day just in tears, just wanting my life to end, and just really I guess enduring a day. And a day to me felt like an endurance event. And the hardest thing, or the bravest thing that I've ever done, is living when I wanted to die. And that it's still so raw. And I know how that felt, and I would never forget that. I take medication now, and I've kind of accepted that that's how it will be, and I'm okay with it now, because it took so many years of not wanting to, of going on it, and then I'll come off it again. But my background is as a physiotherapist, and I treat physical injuries. And if people don't maintain, if they've had a lower back problem and I give them exercises and they don't maintain them, they're going to go back to where they were. The same as if a professional athlete doesn't continue training at the gym, or in whatever way they train, then they won't maintain that level. And I now see that exactly the same way with mental health. So I still see a therapist. I don't do that as regularly as I used to, but because I've built up my own tools now, I guess I've become my own personal trainer to know how and what to do to manage certain situations. But when I can't do that, I've still got someone just to keep me on track. So just accepting that this is who and what I am, and yeah, just going really. And one of the therapies that I've done is actually acceptance and commitment therapy. So it is about acceptance as well as compassion focused therapy. So I'm somebody who could be very hard on myself, and I didn't know how to even really take on board somebody being praiseworthy, and I still struggle with that now. But the strategies are there to build, and also looking back to that analogy of a physio with patients. If I have somebody with an ankle injury, and if they come into me with an ankle injury that was done yesterday, I can help them get better much quicker than if they leave it 2.5 months till they come and see me. They've learned so many bad habits by then that we have to unpick all of that. And so if other people can get help sooner rather than later, then they're not going to be in a situation that I have found myself in. But I think also when I find things tough, when I am in an event and I think, oh, this is really, really hard, I've always got in the back of my mind, it is never as hard as it was in those times where I didn't want to live. And say the biggest endurance events was living through a day, or sometimes living through an hour. And living through an hour was just breaking it down into minutes and just going, well, you've got through another minute. And it's a horrible place to be, really. So an endurance event, at the end of the day, if I don't finish it, it's not life or death. People might think that it's the end of the world when they haven't completed something that they've set a goal, but you're still here to live the tale, and I very nearly wasn't. And unfortunately, I know of too many people who aren't still here to tell that tale. So the more that I can get that message out to people, then the more I will. And I try and make it fun, but by that, so people will say after sort of 50 marathons, God, you're completely nuts. And I thought, what a good idea. So I got a nut costume, ran a marathon dressed as a peanut, but I put a sign on me. On that time, I did say, nuts about mental health, together we can crack it.
It's brilliant. I love it.
Wanted other people to, I know that we've become very PC and you can't say this and you can't say that. Some people are still going to say that. So rather than, not embrace it, I just thought embrace it, and got the Guinness World Record for the fastest nut to run a marathon. And again, got that message, in big letters into the Guinness Book of Records on a visual of people realizing I'm a nut to prove that we can crack this if we all come together. And tackle it in a way that we shouldn't be ashamed of.
Well, thank you for sharing your personal story, and clearly it's tough, but obviously it's an ongoing journey for you. And just I love the reframe you did on your doing an ultra marathon, saying, well, it's not as bad as it was when I was struggling to live an hour a day, an hour a moment. So I think that's an incredible reframe, but obviously that just shows how bad it was, because doing an ultra is pretty tough, but actually you found just an hour at moments when you were really struggling. That was obviously even tougher, and so obviously that is difficult, and I can feel your absolute passion for creating this awareness. So what came first really with this about doing endurance? Was it there to help you, or was it there to create this awareness, or they sort of merged? It's been interesting. What was the starter of all that?
Yeah, no, they have merged, because when I did my first one, I wouldn't even tell anyone that I suffered with depression. So it's become a way of me realizing, oh, actually, I can hopefully make a difference to other people. And so often in my life, I've felt a failure in so many different different ways, that it's still quite alien to me that people are saying you're an inspiration because of what you do, because I'm running around dressed as pieces of fruit. I'm incredibly fortunate that in 3 weeks' time, I'm actually being awarded an honorary doctorate from University of Nottingham. Where,
well done. That's brilliant. Congratulations.
Thank you. That for running around the world dressed as fruit. But it's 30 years since I first applied to that university, and I was turned down. I was rejected from that university, not just once, but actually 6 years in a row. That I'd broken my leg. It's the classic tale of people saying, associating mental illness with mental health with physical health, and saying, well, if you broke your leg, you'd have crutches and everyone would know and it'd be fine. Well, I did break my leg when I was 16 and ended up having physio, and that made me realise I wanted to be a physio. And then didn't quite get the grades, but applied and thought, well, I'll try again. And I got even worse grades the next time. But I knew that I wanted to be a physio. So maybe I started my endurance back then, of thinking, right, I'll keep going with this. I got knocked back. But 6 years after, I got accepted, and I then did the 3 years study. So that was 9 years after first applying. And then 30 years later to have the same university say, we'd like to award you the honorary doctorate is just... Yeah, so with that question, the endurance, I started an endurance event, maybe not of a physical type, way back in 1991, and never at all with any expectation or any desire or anything I wasn't doing it to get an honorary doctorate, and it just for it to come out of the blue. But then to think, gosh, actually, I have been able to, use it, hopefully in a way to help other people. That's why I went into physio. I wanted to help other people. So I've just managed to do it in a different way as time has gone on. So, it didn't start as a physical endurance thing with a purpose, but it now is a driver. Definitely is a driver. And I think, 30 years ago, mental health was never talked about. It just, there was asylums for people who were mentally unwell. So, we've come a long way, but I still think we've got a long way to go, because now people are starting to say, if they say they have a problem and try to get the help, unfortunately, the help isn't that easy to get. And that is really difficult when you've got to admitted first to yourself and then tried to get the help, and the help isn't there. And usually people have got to that really bad point to even ask for help. So I'm just saying to people, just nip it in the bud. If it's not, if you're struggling, then don't let it get to be that really bad place.
Yeah, and I agree. I think it's got easier to share. Obviously, people are more aware of it, which is great. But when it gets to that point when people do share it, I think I'm not experienced it myself in that sense. But what I understand is then it's not gone too far, but it's gone quite far for people to get to that point, because they feel, for whatever reason, it's not big enough to share, or I need help or anything else. And I agree with you. The challenge, and I think the challenge, certainly the post-pandemic, really is, and a lot for young people as well, is getting the support there and an investment that will get that. I think the awareness is brilliant. The workplace is becoming better. And it's still some way to go, a lot more. But it's then taking that to, okay, I've said I need some help. Is then getting that support, and that's help. And I like the fact you've paralleled that sort of endurance of applying for your university. It took 6 years. And you kept going, which says something a little about who you are and what you're like. And perhaps you're already setting yourself up for this. But in essence, life is an endurance event for all of us, or an ultra event, really, isn't it? And I think sometimes we always think things in a short space, but actually we're here for a long time, hopefully. and we've got to see our lives a bit more of an endurance, a bit more of the long term. And just switching that to almost that sort of thing about resilience, really, because I think, to me, in some ways, resilience is part of mental health. It's almost like a building block. It's like you call it armor. It's like a thing that will help you, protect you as well. Out of all the challenges you've done, and you probably can't remember them all now because there's so many, you've done so many. You've even got up to the amount of marathons. I thought you'd done 50, but you've done more like now 71. So there we go. It keeps going. What would you rate as your toughest event, and why?
I've probably got a couple of answers to this question, because as an individual, or also as a team, have been some quite difficult times. So the Marathon des Sables was tough, and I did that as an individual who didn't know anybody, and it's 6.5 marathons in 7 days across the Sahara Desert, carrying all your own kit. And in fact, the first time I signed up for it, I didn't end up doing it. I had other people saying, well, I think you won't be able to do that. And they put all that doubt in my mind. And I thought, well, yeah, they're probably right. And that was other people's fears. It wasn't my own fear. I knew that I wanted to do it. But then when I signed up the second time, I thought, no, I am going to do this. And I forgot to mention, on the fourth day, it's actually a double marathon. And I do remember thinking, I'd got a chest infection. I had been, the first day, I'd unfortunately got to a checkpoint, vomited everywhere. They'd kind of got the drip out ready to put in me, but I managed to, I wasn't adverse to having that. There's some people who were saying, I don't want that because it'll put on my time penalty. It wasn't about the time at all. It was just about the completion. And then the next day, unfortunately, I was very dehydrated, and that ends up with the other end not working quite so well. And then on the third day, and I tell this as quite a funny story. One of the people who I'd met in the tent that I was staying, I say a tent, it's a covering. He had decided, you get lots of blisters because you're in the heat and it's sandy and your feet are really blistered. And I'd been really dehydrated. In the middle of the night, I went for some water, and I thought, bit warm. It's the desert, everything's warm. So I got some other water instead. And in the morning, I saw this bright orange bottle, and I said to the guy, I said, what electrolyte drink are you using? And he went, oh, no, you don't want to drink that. I said, no, I already have. And I realized that he had decided in the middle of the night that his feet were in too much pain to take the 20 steps out of the tent to go to the loo. So he'd used a bottle, which happened to be the bottle that I then drank. So then went on to the long day the next day, and that was tough. But I remember being at the airport on the final day, finished it, and somebody said, how did you find it? First day this, second day this, third day that. Oh, that was you. I said, yeah. He said, you got me through the MDS, because whenever I was feeling bad, I just kept thinking, at least I'm not that girl who drank her 10 tea. So I now use that as a story that you never know who you're inspiring. Exactly. And how you are inspiring.
Despite you probably struggling and sort of having a tough time, actually you're inspiring somebody else, thinking, at least I'm not as bad as that, as it were.
And quite often I will use that it isn't as bad as when I was that that unwell, and as an individual that was a tough event. It was really tough. But I then a couple of years later set up a team of wounded, injured and sick females. We wanted to cycle the race across America. All male teams had done it before, but there'd never been an all female team. So got a team together. Unfortunately, it took 18 months to put together, to get the funding, to do the training, we had a wider support team who were also wounded, injured and sick as well. And 2 weeks before, I fell off my bike and had I didn't realise at the time, but quite a mild traumatic brain injury. I'd got a black eye, and my face was obvious that something wasn't right, but I hadn't realised quite how much everything had impacted on me. of the stress of sort of leading this big event, having the idea and then having all these other people in the team, and for this to happen 2 weeks before, and was I going to be able to do it? But for once, it was something visual, and people could see. People were there saying to me, what's happened? Because I'd got this, my face out here, and and a black eye, and I also didn't realise that a part of concussion then became depression. Sort of a week after, I had a week where I was just suicidal, and this was, as I say, 2 weeks before actually going out and doing the event. So that was really difficult to then go and actually do the event. Physically, for the rest of me, I was fine. I was very, very lucky. I still can't remember names. I was very good with names before. A lot of people say, I can't remember names either, but it was one of my strengths that I could remember names. My short-term memory on names and places 3 years on, I still haven't quite got. But to me, it was that suddenly having an invisible injury or illness that became visible for 2 weeks. And it was really tough to then be part of a team where I was not functioning at all. So lots of times so the Race Across America from a team perspective, but the Marathon des Sables from an individual perspective. But now, one of the things after the Race Across America, I told myself, I wrote a list of 100 positives of that event. Maybe opportunities that have given me, or different things that I'd learned because of it. The fact that I was, had the opportunity to cycle across America, and really had to work hard on what I'd seen as a big failure in some ways. Although the overall goal had been achieved, it was still a big failure to me. So I had to work hard on that.
And just going back to the MDS sort of event, which sounded quite a tough race, the fact that you were on a drip at some point, dehydrated and drinking the wrong fluids at one point. I get that. But just before the event, you had naysayers basically saying that you shouldn't do it, couldn't do it, and obviously you tried the first time, but you didn't apply, and then you almost backed out, I presume. How did you overcome that? Because obviously people could be listening to this now, right? Might not be doing an event, but they might be doing something new in a company. They might be pushing the boundaries, might have an innovative idea, they might be starting a new business, they might be. And they'll have naysayers. There's always naysayers who will say, "Oh, you can't do that. It's not good enough. It's rubbish." Or a host of ideas that all. How do you fight through or deal with that and still continue to do something?
I'm not going to pretend it's easy, because that would be false. And one thing I do like to pride myself on is that I'm quite honest and open, and often that makes me quite vulnerable as well. But I think rephrase what you asked me. I told you this brain injury doesn't.
No, that's fine. Just people saying you shouldn't do that, you can't do that.
Right, yes, yeah.
How did you push against that and did it basically?
I think sometimes if you turn it around and they not them be your focus, because you're doing it for your own reason. You didn't set out. Often you haven't set out to prove somebody else wrong. I think if you've got the belief in yourself of why you want to do something, even if it doesn't end with the expectation that you thought it would do, you have learned. You'll learn things. You'll meet people. There'll be things that you realise you don't ever want to do. Even if it's just, I don't want to ever say to someone else, you can't do that. If that means that I'm never the person that says to someone else, I don't think, you're not going to be able to achieve that. That in itself was the one thing that I learned, that I suppose the same as when I was a student physio, there was people that I learned, supervisors who I learned what I didn't want to be like. There was ones that had a really real impact on me, and I thought, that's the type of person and physio that I want to be. I don't want to be the naysayer or the negative. So I don't want to associate myself with that type of I want to be true to who I am and what I believe that I can do. And quite a nice, well, quite a strange story. Quite recently, I was incredibly fortunate on International Women's Day to win the Defence Discount Services Inspirational Woman of the Year. And I was given a really beautiful glassware with my name engraved and what it was. And I got asked to go and speak to the team. Went and got them all dressed up as different pieces of fruit. And but the night before, my mum, I'd stopped at my parents on the way. And Mum said, "Oh, what is it you're doing tomorrow?" And I said, "Oh, I'm going to give this talk to this." And I said, "Oh, let me just show you." And I went and got the glassware, showed it her. She said, "Oh, wow." She gave it back to me. I dropped it and it shattered into thousands and thousands of tiny pieces, but it had 3 main pieces left to it. And she said, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And I was like, it's okay. It's only a piece of glass. Now, in years gone by, the anxiety of having to tell these people the next day that this had happened would have just riddled me. I wouldn't have had any sleep at all. But I was able to kind of go, it's a piece of glass. It doesn't matter. All I can do is tell them. I can't hide it. I can't stick it back together. Went and gave the talk. As I say, got them dressed as fruit. Had a bit of a smile, and then said, "Oh, I'm really sorry. I've got this to tell you. This is what's happened." And they said, "Don't worry. We'll send you another one." That was it. And so it made me realise it would have been pointless worrying about all of that. And I was driving home and I thought, I don't need a new piece of glass. I've got 3 big pieces here that I can actually stick back together. I've been broken physically when I broke my leg. I've gone on to run thousands of miles, and I've been broken mentally. And I'm not perfect. I'm not a shiny, bright things. My experience has taken me, to all these different places. So I thought, actually, I'm going to get that stuck back together. And actually, if it's sitting on the side somewhere, somebody might say, "What happened there?" And it's got much more of a story than if it was a shiny, brand new, looking great. Because none of us are perfect, and I think accepting your imperfections is the best way you can live your life, really. Again, I think that's all helped by the acceptance and commitment therapy that I've undergone. The years of therapy.
I mean, you have a great ability to turn anything into a story to talk about, creating more awareness about mental health. I mean, you the way you come up with all your ideas for your events, the way you've just taken something that's broken and you went, "No, I'm going to put it back together. It gives me a great opportunity to share." And you've just shared that story that I was broken. Now I'm getting fixed. I'm not perfect. And I think that's brilliant. It's almost like a real talent you have beyond all the other stuff you're doing. So you seem to have this sort of creativity. I was wondering if just explore that, because going back to the MDS, is somebody looked at you and you were their inspiration because you weren't doing very well from their perspective of drips, everything else going on. So that helped them, which is great. You inspiring. How did you get through all that? Because you were probably... What was your inspiration, and what was the creativity in your mind to get you through those daily challenges?
It was really quite simple. Having been a physio and having been to Afghanistan and seeing people who had lost their limbs, and I'd got a guy with me who was a double amputee, a double below knee amputee. He was actually quite a lot quicker than me. And I've still got arms and legs. I've still got the opportunity to be able to do these things. There's some things that I can't do because of my illness, and it's accepting those things. But I'm still very fortunate to have my limbs. So if I can walk, run, cycle, swim, then I'm very, very grateful. And I think gratitude has played a large part in my life going forward, of recognizing what I have got rather than what I haven't got, and what I can do rather than what I can't do. because we can all dwell on the things that we can't do, and there'll still be people that will say it was all right for you, you've got this, you've got that, you've got, we don't know other people's situations, and we can see their shop window of what it looks like they are, but we don't see the back office, and everybody's got a back office in life that they either don't share with people, but I think judgments, you know, often people will judge other people, and it's trying to take that away, and we are who we are, and just making the best of what you've got, really. Yeah.
So I mean, you've sort of touched on it really, in terms of your lessons from your events, lessons from your own mental health experience. What would be your, I don't know, one or two key pieces of advice if you were, I don't want to say talk about to your younger self, but talking to people right now, whether they're in a workplace, whether they're not in a workplace, listen to this. What would be your one or two things, pieces of advice on life or on mental health?
A couple, I guess. I mean, we were talking about it just before we came on, that you know, to fail, I see that now as the first attempt in learning, and you know, my experiences have shown that I've learnt a lot, and I'm able to do things differently, even if it's just with my mental health, the therapy that I've had that I can now apply to different situations. If I can share them with other people, even it's just a tiny little nugget that they go, yeah, that's a good way to think of it, then it's about taking, for me, it's about taking pressure off myself. For some people thrive on pressure and they do very well with it. But we're all different, and it's accepting that we are all different. But if we can come together, we can complement each other often. It would be no good if we were all the same. And one of the things that I say to, I speak in schools now to a lot of young children, and you can have too much of a good thing. And when I was in Antarctica doing one of the marathons there, it was a 24-hour daylight, and you think, wow, this is amazing. But not having darkness, actually, you couldn't have, it was hard to sleep. You could never have fireworks in a place like that. And I say to children that, you know, the same as we've got beautiful weather at the moment, people then before long will be going, well, we need rain because we need to water the plants, we need water. So it's balance. It's about having balance in life of things, and now able to look back and go, well, my mental health and my mental illness is something I've learned a lot about myself from. I don't want other people to have to go through it, but if I can use that to prevent them having to be in that place, I will do anything. It was, that bad when it isn't managed. But yeah, I think balance is one of the key things in life, really, for everybody, because yeah, we can either have too much of a good thing or too much of a bad thing, and they'll either or will put us in a state that we don't function very well over a long amount of time.
Thank you for that. So that's great advice. I love those tips and from what you've learned. You truly are an inspirational person, and what you've achieved, what you continue to do, your creativity, how you've got this absolute drive of using these events and using who you are to drive this mental health awareness and education. It's just amazing, and I feel it's a real privilege to have had this conversation with you and to know you in this context. I really do thank you for coming on and just giving some of your time on this podcast. And I hope people have been inspired. They should be inspired, but also perhaps sort of learned a bit more about how to perhaps reach out in terms of mental health to help themselves with mental health, but also to be inspired by you as you continue to inspire people daily. So yeah, really thank you for coming on today.
Oh, thank you so much. I don't ever really think I'm actually doing, but yeah, that's really kind. And I'm having to work on accepting compliments. So thank you very much. But yeah, I'm just me. I'm a pretty normal person, and hopefully people could see that I am just a normal person that's had a difficult time and want to use that to prevent other people having that difficult time. So thank you for your time as well.
No, an ordinary person doing extraordinary things. That's what I would say. So yeah, thank you very much.
Oh.